12 News is your local election headquarters. Now, we continue our Where They Stand series on WPRI.com and our 12 Plus Smart TV app. I'm Ray Bakari. Joining me today is Republican Alex Acermely, who is running in the August 5th Senate District 4 special election. This special election was called after the death of the late Senate President Dominic Ruggiero in April. Acermely faces Democrat Stefano Famiglietti, who is a North Providence town councilman, and the district itself contains parts of North Providence and Providence. Alex, it's good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Ray. I really appreciate being on and the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
For my first question, tell those watching a little bit about yourself and why you're running for state senate.
Sure. My name's Alex Acermely. I am running in the state senate special election this summer. And I've lived in the district my entire life, born and raised on Fruit Hill Avenue in North Providence, Rhode Island. And I've loved it my entire time being there. I lived there with my 5-year-old daughter, who was the light of my life. My dad still lives in the district, and in going out and introducing myself to my neighbors, constituents, hearing a lot of concerns, getting to chat with everyone, it's become immediately apparent to me that we have a great opportunity in front of us to preserve that wonderful community, to make it better for working families and those struggling to get by, for small businesses that are setting up roots in the district, to make it a place where they can grow and prosper and give back to our community. For our seniors, like my dad and the other 20%, of our district, we want to make it a place where they can retire safely, comfortably, happily, and really continue on all of our great stuff that's going on and improve it in areas where it needs to be improved so we can all live, work, prosper, and grow as it should be.
Now looking at some policy, one of the bigger bills that was passed this past legislative session was the ban on so-called assault-style weapons. Toward the end of the session, there was a debate between two versions. One version, which was by Rep. Knight in the House, banned possession, sale, creation, and buying of those weapons. Meanwhile, the Senate version banned everything but possession, and then that was the one that ultimately ended up being signed into law. Where did you stand in that conversation? Did you support or oppose either bills?
Well, Ray, I was opposed staunchly to both. I'm a conservative constitutionalist. I'm a practicing attorney. I've been a trial lawyer for 15 years, and so I look at it through the eyes of an attorney, number one, who has defended our constitutional rights and knows legally how important that is, how important it is for the individuals who we're protecting as well. And so I was opposed to the ban generally because I think it's unconstitutional, right? And 2A is important, our Second Amendment is important, but I also think it's a very slippery slope, right? So if we don't stand up and defend those constitutional rights, 2A and others, well, what's next? We can't lose freedom of speech, we can't lose freedom of the press, we can go on and on and on. But I think we'd see a real degradation of the town, right? If you take away those essential liberties and essential rights, you can't have it happen. So you see out and about the color yellow. You see the Gadsden flag associated a lot with the AWB and protecting 2A in particular. And I think it certainly is applicable to that. But I also am reminded of what that symbolizes, right? And that goes back 250 years to our American Revolution, right? And don't tread on me means don't tread on 2A and all of our civil liberties and rights that we're afforded. And I think it is critical today and moving forward. As I had said, I want a community that works for all of us, in protecting those values and those constitutional liberties is so critical. And I do think that the assault weapon ban, both versions and the one that passed, is ultimately unconstitutional. I think it will likely end up before the courts, and I think it probably will be struck down eventually, which really it would amount to another bureaucratic waste of resources in time, which I know we'll get into some other issues, which is really the crux of what I'm focused on here as well. But to answer the question, I am opposed to it, and ultimately I think it'll be struck down.
Speaking of those other topics we're going to talk about, let's talk about the state budget. If the assault weapons ban is a big bill in terms of the attention, the budget is the biggest bill in terms of the size and impact it has on the state. Lawmakers approved a budget of over $14 billion with a B. And I should just note for those watching, we're taping this post-session and before the August 5th primary. We're taping this in late July. So the situation with the budget in Rhode Island, usually year to year, there's that built-in deficit and the budget always increases. And this is a bit of a broader question, so I'll give you leeway with your answer. If you can give me one thing you would support to try and fix the budgetary situation and turn it into a different direction.
Ray, I think Rhode Island, our district included, but the state doesn't have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem, right? Our budget is bloated with waste, with fraud. It's unchecked. There's not enough oversight. There's not enough transparency. There's not enough authenticity. And our working families and our small businesses are drowning in it. We have 1.1 million people in Rhode Island, residents. Our state budget that recently passed is $14.3 billion. For comparison, New Hampshire has 1.4 million people. Their state budget is $15 billion. Now, at first glance, you may say, well, it's not a tremendous difference in population, not a tremendous difference, even though it's $1 billion in budget. But what people don't realize right away is New Hampshire's budget is for 2 years. Our budget here in Rhode Island is for 1 year. So how are we the smallest state with a $14.3 billion budget, basically double of a similar state like New Hampshire? And what does that tell me? Well, every day, people in our district, working families, sit down and they make hard choices about spending, about curbing, things that aren't necessities, about saving for the future. Why can't our local government do the same thing? And really, I would argue for our current generation, for our seniors who got us here, for our children, future generations, we can no longer burden our taxpayers with unchecked, unregulated waste and fraud. There are countless examples that we can give to turn to. Coming here today, I had to take the bridge. I live in North Providence, came to the studio, and I hope that is not a future reminder of some of the mistakes that we've made, right, in budgeting, in oversight, and in smart spending. We don't need big government. We need smart government, right? The state's UHIP system, for example, that was $650 million. So that was designed to streamline the benefits program, and candidly, it doesn't work, right? So over $500 million right there that could have went to our schools, to supporting small businesses, to helping families be able to plant their roots right here and to grow and prosper. And so I'm not talking about cutting essentials, right? So for example, 350,000 people in Rhode Island rely on Medicaid, right? Once again, I would look at something like that with an eye towards cutting fraud, cutting waste, streamlining what works, improving what doesn't, getting by a lot of the unnecessary bureaucracy, and helping people, right, keep those coverages that they need. Something like that is essential. As one example, there's a whole lot in the state that is not. I think it takes political courage to sit down and start from the bottom up and say what is being spent to benefit the people, the taxpayers, right? Who is owed those benefits, right? And what's being wasted? There are so many bloated positions in our state, jobs, just an incredible amount of waste in general. And so I think we really need to sit down with a keen eye, right, and with an honest eye, right? We've had a one-party system in this district for a long time. I read a tweet of yours a couple weeks ago that I believe mentioned the last Republican to hold this seat was Theodore R. Lowe, if I'm not mistaken, in 1969. We don't have.
I should interject. That was a mistaken list. So it was a House district. But continue. I just wanted to make sure to clarify that.
Even so, the seat had been held by Senator Ruggiero since 1985. Before him, his father-in-law held the seat. So it's been a long time since there's been another voice, and I want our community to know that there is another voice. These aren't the Kennedy Democrats anymore, right? We have progressive leadership in the House, and another progressive in office will vote in line with that progressive leadership. And we've gone on too long, too far, without the political courage for someone to stand up and say, if this doesn't make sense to spend for the people. I'm not just going to make the politically convenient choice. I'm not going to vote just in line with what party leaders tell me to do. I think we really need a lot of analysis, and we need someone to say, no, we need to look out for our current interests now and for the future. We can't just keep taking from the hardworking families that give to the state and our future generations. Otherwise, we won't have a system that works. And not just for the connected few, for everyone, so we can grow.
And just to put a pin in that part of it, while we're still talking about budget, although it's a small part of the district, Providence is still in the district. I know you and the councilman live in North Providence, but Providence had an interesting budget situation of their own. The mayor was asking the General Assembly lawmakers to approve allowing the city to raise its tax levy above the state mandated cap of 4%, but no higher than 8%. At the time of this taping, the budget has since been signed, and I think it was a little under 6% it ended up being for the levy. So just a two-parter here. First one, would you have supported or opposed that bill?
I would have opposed it. And I understand Mayor Smiley's predicament. But going along with what I had just said, with spending, with oversight, with regulation, I would have done everything in my power to try to find another way to accommodate what needed to be accommodated other than raising taxes above the cap.
And speaking of that, my second part, just so we can quickly get topic, what could the city have done differently, in your opinion, or if there was any other solution?
Well, I think, again, you start from the ground up, right? I would have zero issue with starting with essentially a zero balance, right? And I've heard the concerns of, right? Of course, we want to protect the things that everyone needs. I had mentioned things like healthcare, right? Health coverage. Of course, we want our seniors. Another example, we're one of 8 states that taxes Social Security. I don't think that's right for our seniors. 20% of our population in the district are seniors. They're struggling to survive, just like the working families, just like the small businesses. So I would really sit down and audit the entire budget, right? And start from that ground up. What do we need? What is waste? And I think in assessing everything, the totality, it was, again, the politically easy choice just to add on. Right? And how many times can we do it? Every couple of years we can't say, well, this one major issue came up. I guess we can't cut from the waste, from the fraud, from the other areas of need, because that may not be so politically popular. The easy thing to do is to just simply add to the budget. But there are consequences to that. And, someone like myself can speak to it included. I've been a trial attorney for 15 years. I love living in the district. And every day I get in my car and I have to make a 50-mile commute up 95 to the Boston area to work. That's the only way my young family can financially survive and still live in the place where I want to live and work. So I think the taxpayers are tired of hearing the excuses. I think the taxpayers want full accountability. They want full transparency. And I wouldn't be afraid to start from zero and really factor everything in. And I would do everything in my power to avoid another tax hike, because that's not fair. Right? And to that point as well, I think an inspector general would be a good idea, right? For nonpartisan reasons, both sides. I've pitched that, out and about canvassing in different discussion groups that I've had, and it's hard to argue against a pair of removed eyes, right? Whose sole job it is to protect the budget, right, to monitor what's happening, and to be there as a safeguard and a safety net. So that's just one idea that I would have. But basically, you have to get in there, roll up your sleeves, and figure out any way that we can stop taking from the people who feed us and give back to them.
And for my final question, this relates to the healthcare crisis our state's facing, because there's been some impacts even in the district. Fatima Hospital, which is located in Senate District 4, is having a tough situation. We've seen Anchor Medical shut down, community health centers in Providence shut down. I'll keep this one a bit broad as well. What would you support to address the healthcare crisis?
Number one, and this was another concern that I've heard quite often in the district, we have a problem with keeping and maintaining good doctors, good healthcare providers here. And that's something that should never happen. And so how do we address that? Number one, I think, again, I hate to harp on it, but it's so critical. You can't have fraud and waste, sabotaging systems that should work for people who need it, like Medicaid, right? That'll always be protected and preserved and improved, under someone like myself. I think another way we do it is you have to make this a hospitable state and district for providers in facilities like Fatima Hospital and good doctors. You have to make it a place where they want to come work. They're fairly compensated, right? They should be paid for the good work they do. And not have a situation where we're seeing droves of talent leave and we have a shortage of providers, people who need it. So I think, again, how do we do that? Well, a lot of deregulation needs to happen. We need to start with a lot more favorable taxes for businesses and corporations to provide those services. And we need to incentivize the talent, the people, right, who do it, right? So I want this to be an area where doctors are attracted to come live and work here. My sister, for example, is a nurse practitioner. She has worked over the line in Massachusetts her entire career. And like me, as a trial attorney, would love to come back home, set up roots here again, and work and live. That's very hard to do economically, for the reasons that I just said. So it's an area where that is a non-negotiable, right? That's a human interest right that everyone should have, access to quality, good care. And we need to figure that out. And again, another example of waste like the UHIP system. That was supposed to streamline and preserve benefits. It doesn't work. So I think we need to go into this election with fresh eyes, understand that I'm not part of the machine. I don't have a political connection or background, but what I do have is a passion for my community. I have a passion for my work as an attorney, especially a trial attorney. I know how to fight, and I stand my ground on my principles and what I believe in and what needs to be done. And I also know how to successfully negotiate. Sometimes you do need to reach across the aisle, and you do need to come up with pragmatic, real solutions for people. And so that's what I would do here.
That's all the questions I had, Alex. I want to thank you for coming down. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks so much, Ray. Really appreciate it again.
And
I want to remind the voters, too, August 5th, please come out. I would love your support, and thank you so much.
And thank you for watching this edition of Where They Stand on WPRI.com or the 12 Plus Smart TV app. As a reminder, 12 News is your local election headquarters, and we have the other interviews related to this specific special election. 12 News is your local election headquarters. Now, we continue our Where They Stand series on WPRI.com and our 12 Plus Smart TV app. I'm Ray Bakari. Joining me today is Stefano Familietti, who is one of 4 Democrats running in the State Senate District 4 special election this summer. He's also a North Providence town councilman. This special election was called after the death of Senate President Dominic Ruggiero, who passed away in April, and the district itself contains all of North Providence and a tiny portion of Providence. Stefano, it's good to have you.
Thanks, Ray. Thank you for having me.
So for my first question, can you explain to those watching a little bit about yourself and why you're running for state senate?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you said, Stefano Familietti. I'm a councilman in North Providence. I've been on the North Providence Town Council for 6.5 years. I'm a lifelong resident of North Providence, went through the public school system in North Providence very proudly, did me well. I went to the University of Rhode Island, went to Roger Williams University School of Law. I'm licensed to practice law in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. I currently own my own law firm out of Providence, and one thing that I do love is my community, and I'd say that's the primary reason that I got involved in this election. I've done my very best to serve on the town council in North Providence and serve my community. With the unfortunate passing of Senate President Ruggiero, who was very dear to all of us in North Providence and the community, it was important to me to have somebody who has very similar, strong community roots to fill that position. Somebody who's from the community, grew up in the community, and who's been actively involved in the community. And reflecting upon that, I do feel that I'm the most qualified person to fit that role. I would draw upon my community experience, my connections in the community, as well as my governmental experience locally, in order to adequately represent the district and try to fill Senate President Ruggiero's shoes the best I can.
Looking at some policy now and some bills that lawmakers passed this session, because if you were a state senator now, you would have had to cast some crucial votes on these. So the first one, aside from the state budget, arguably one of the biggest bills was the ban on so-called assault-style weapons. Toward the end, there were two different versions of the bill being debated. There was the House one that banned possession, selling, buying, and manufacturing of these weapons, certain rifles and shotguns. And then the one that ended up passing this, an amended version, just only banned the buying, selling, and manufacturing and not possession. Where do you stand on that conversation?
Well, at the very outset, I would support common sense gun legislation. Safety is obviously a primary concern for everybody. With that initial iteration of the bill, I did have concerns with, particularly with the broadness of the language, definitional issues, as well as potential constitutional issues. As an attorney, I always keep that in mind because, these are codified constitutional rights, and I think that any legislation that we're dealing with, you have to really be deliberate and take care when you're coming up against constitutional rights. That being said, obviously, that second iteration came at the 11th hour of the session. So I really haven't had a chance to really dive deep into that and get through the definitions and see where I stand on that one in particular. However, what I will say is that as a senator, I think that you will find that I will be very deliberate in my approach to any piece of legislation that comes across my desk. That's how I am on the council. I'm very cognizant of the issues. And one thing about me is I'm willing to work with anybody and anybody to try to address the issues at hand. I think that's the best way to serve the population, specifically District 4, which we would represent. But as the community in Rhode Island as a whole, you really have to be deliberate in your consideration of this legislation and to be very collaborative and work with everybody to find the appropriate solution and appropriate balances. So that's really what I'm looking forward to whenever pieces of legislation come across my desk.
So it sounds like you oppose that House version and the Senate version. You don't have a stance on it?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know enough about it. But again, I would be cautious about constitutional rights. I think that we have to be fair across the board. If we value our Constitution, which I do, that includes the Second Amendment, and we need to take care with those issues and be, again, deliberate and make sure that they are constitutionally sound.
And I should bring this up because your stances on the assault-style weapons ban is a little bit different than your three other opponents in the Democratic primary. They all favored the ban. Before any legislation was voted on, there was a resolution that the North Providence Town Council passed, and I believe, if correct me if I'm wrong, you sponsored it, that said that the town opposes it, though it's non-binding.
Correct.
That speaks sound.
Yeah, correct. And again, that's going to that first House iteration version that came out. And those concerns that I expressed were the reasons for that. When you have broad definitional issues and potential constitutional issues from, again, a legal perspective, it could violate the Second Amendment, could violate the takings clause of the Constitution. That's going to open up the state to liability as well. So I guess from my approach, rather than do a knee-jerk reaction, I'm very thoughtful in the way that I approach things, and I want to make sure that we get it right, too, while we solve the actual issues. So, again, coming across any legislation, I would be that deliberate and thoughtful and consider everything.
Now moving on to the state budget, aside from the assault weapons ban, this was the actual biggest bill that passed, both in terms of size and impact on the state. Year to year, Rhode Island usually has these budgetary issues with the built-in deficit, and then there's a lot of conversations around how to fix that, whether it's cutting what some say wasteful spending. Some people say we need to maybe implement a millionaire's tax or get more revenue. I'll keep this question broad. If you can give me one thing you'd favor, what would it be to try to fix the state's budgetary issues?
Well, it's definitely a delicate dance that you have to go through, okay? In general, I'm not in favor of increasing taxes. You mentioned the millionaire's tax. It's something that I would look into, but generally I view it with skepticism because, if you're going to be thoughtful about these processes, you have to understand that for every action that you take, there is a reaction to it. What does that law or increased taxes for those individuals do to our economy? That's something that I'd be concerned about. So one thing that I would like to look at, like I did on the town council, is roll up your sleeves and really dig into the budget. See if there is any areas that you can cut while maintaining these essential services. That's a balance that we do all the time in North Providence. And I'm proud to say that for most of my tenure on the North Providence Town Council, we've avoided tax increases while maintaining the essential services that people do rely upon. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to have somebody in there that's really willing to roll up their sleeves, that has done these types of budget analyses before. And so that's what I would be looking forward to with the state budget. One thing I will say, though, is that I do think this year's past state budget, I will applaud the General Assembly because they did have quite a difficult task ahead of them. And I will give a nod to the Senate in their initiatives to make sure that there were investments in our healthcare system, which, as we all know, is of big concern right now, as well as transportation and education as well. So it's definitely a fine balance and a little bit of a dance that you have to make in going through these budgets to make sure that you're not being overly burdensome to the taxpayers, but making sure you make those appropriate investments where they are especially needed.
I should also know we're taping this post-legislative session and before the primary in July. So now to sticking with the budget, you have your North Providence ties, and that's a big part of the district, but Providence is also in the district, and they have a tricky budget situation, even to the point where Mayor Brett Smiley asked the General Assembly to approve for this only this fiscal year to go above the 4% cap for increase in taxes, but no higher than 8%. And that stemmed from a $15 million expense from a lawsuit with the school district. Two-parter, but starting off with the first part, would you have supported or opposed that bill?
Well, here's what I'll say, okay, not being intimately involved with it. Again, I'm somebody that you don't want to raise taxes on anybody. I don't think anybody really does. So I'm sympathetic with Mayor Smiley and the city council. They were dealt a pretty heavy hand with the lawsuit that you were talking about. Multiple millions of dollars that they have to find in order to invest in the education system. Now, they can't print their way out of that mess. So you have to also be a realist. While you generally need to be averse to tax increases, you have to be a realist. So what I can say is, without getting deep into the actual bill and the language itself, is that as a legislator, what I would do is collaborate with the local officials. Try to give them the tools that they need in order to be successful. Because as a local legislator, I understand the challenges that you have with local municipal budgets. So I would work with them and try to do whatever we can to avoid being overly burdensome on the taxpayers themselves.
And now, Councilman, I can understand that, but just to kind of go back to the original point of the question for those watching at home, it's an up or down vote on legislation.
Correct.
Or you could do the not voting, like going in the hallway and taking the phone call. But how would you have voted?
In that instance, I mean, all indications point to that it was something that was necessary for the city in order to be able to balance their budget. We can't let Providence not balance their budget. So most likely I would have been in support of that given these unique circumstances.
And you mentioned collaborating with fellow policymakers to try and not have that kind of situation. That actually plays in the second part I've been asking all the candidates. Is there another way the city could have dealt with the situation to not need a tax increase above the cap?
Well, I'm not sure that they could do it at that specific time. You know, at that point, you're dealing with the hand that you're dealt at that time. However, going forward, I do think there are ways that the state legislature can help our local municipalities. You know, one thing from being in North Providence and learning a little more about Providence is that you have two very unique communities. North Providence is unique in the sense that it is vastly residential and there's not so much commercial. So that means that the tax burden largely falls on the residential taxpayers. So whenever there is a revenue shortfall, like we're potentially facing with the Fatima Hospital issue, the burden is going to fall on the shoulders of the residential taxpayers. Whereas in other communities that have more of a commercial or manufacturing base, you can spread the tax burden out a little bit more. Providence is in another unique situation with many of their properties being nonprofits and not taxable. So what I would like to do at the state level is give aid to these communities in these unique situations so they avoid these issues in the future. I'd like to really invest in our pilot programs. payment in lieu of taxes. That would help both municipalities, given these unique situations, because particularly in North Providence, any small revenue shortfall is directly going to impact our residential tax base, and we have nowhere to spread it out.
And then for my final question, speaking of Fatima, I'll also keep this broad because the topic of the healthcare crisis our state is facing is multifaceted, and there's a lot of solutions being presented. And to go a little bit more on what the healthcare crisis that we're facing is, you're seeing issues like what Fatima is facing, Anchor Medical shutting down, community health centers in Providence closing. And it boils down to, a lot of people say that want to take on this issue say we need to increase Medicaid reimbursement rates. That's the main solution we're hearing. In your opinion, what does the legislature need to do to address the healthcare crisis?
Well, I'll applaud the legislature. They did make those investments in higher Medicaid reimbursements for primary care physicians. It's extremely important. We have primary care physicians that are leaving the state. We're also happy that they were able to make their investments in hospitals and nursing homes as well. We need to make sure that we're competitive with the surrounding areas, because if we lose our workforce, we're in some serious trouble. If we were to lose Fatima Hospital or Roger Williams Hospital, I'm not sure our state healthcare system would be able to sustain that increased burden. So we do need to make those specific investments from a legislative point of view and a budgetary point of view. So I applaud them for doing it. It's a step in the right direction, and we need to keep monitoring it and work with our healthcare partners, whether they be nurses, doctors, to see what they need. How can our state government help them maintain their competitive edge in their local region and make sure that our hospitals, doctors' offices, facilities are staffed? Because at the end of the day, any shortfall in the workforce is going to directly impact patient care. Patients will not be going to doctor's office because they're not there or because they're going to be concerned about long wait times. We can't have that. That's a recipe for disaster.
That's all the questions I have. Councilman, I want to thank you for coming down here,
you.
and I appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching this edition of Where They Stand. Remember, 12 News is your local election headquarters. We have all the other candidate